everyone. Welcome back to Tefillah Tidbits on Tuesday. I'm Rabbi Molly, and I'm here with Josh. Hey, Josh.
Hello.
And we are excited for another episode. Today, we are continuing on our Kabbalat Shabbat journey, and we are at kind of the main event of Kabbalat Shabbat. We're at Lecha Dodi. So we've had our psalms leading up to Lecha Dodi, and now this is a very unique poem. Poem prayer that was written by a Kabbalist, Solomon Alkabetz, in the 16th century. Alkabetz didn't originally live in Israel, but moved to Israel later in life to Sfat, and he's also the person who is credited with the initiating that custom of Tikkun Leil Shavuot, the custom of spending the entire night before Shavuot engaged in Torah study, which is something that we at Temple B'nai Torah do. So this is a really interesting poem. It is a beautiful poem that it alludes to all sorts of biblical texts, Song of Songs, Torah texts, prophetic texts, Psalms. Probably most well known is the connection to Song of Songs, Lecha Dodi, Come My Beloved, just draws directly on the language of Song of Songs. And Lecha Dodi, it kind of creates this drama where it takes the Shabbat ritual and it turns it into this reenactment as a sacred wedding. So the whole idea of Lecha Dodi, or behind Lecha Dodi, is that it's kind of weird to say because it's a little odd to think about, but we're essentially every Shabbat we the people of Israel are marrying Shabbat. And that comes from this idea from the Talmud that Shabbat was perceived as the bride, and the day itself, the sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, was thought of as this sort of epic wedding ceremony where we were engaging in a sacred partnership with Shabbat. And it's a beautiful idea. And then when you look at the text, it's sort of odd because there's this idea of the love language, Lecha Dodi, come my beloved, enter, O bride. But then when you look at some of the verses, there's a lot of language about desolation and war. So really the first two stanzas of Lecha Dodi are about Shabbat. So the first stanza is about the mitzvah of Shabbat, Shamor v'Zachor, remembering and guarding or engaging in the mitzvah of Shabbat. And the second one talks about Shabbat as this fountain, this source of blessing. But then after that, it goes into talking about Jerusalem as a ruined city, talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Things like verse 6 says, an end to shame and degradation, forget your sorrow, quiet your groans. The afflicted of my people find respite in you, the city renewed upon its ancient ruins. So kind of an odd combo when you enter in and you're like, oh, I'm marrying Shabbat and it's this beautiful ceremony, but then all of a sudden it's talking about the ruined city of Jerusalem. And for that reason, this prayer has gone in and out of fashion in Reform Judaism over time. At one point, it was cut out completely. Now we have the poem in our prayer book in Mishkan Tefillah, but we, as many Reform synagogues do, we sort of selectively sing verses. So we almost always sing the first two stanzas, which talk about Shabbat, and then we move selectively to verses 5 and 9. 9 is that moment when we stand and symbolically welcome in the bride of Shabbat, just as people often stand when a bride enters the room at a wedding ceremony. But what I want to focus on is that we often talk about Shabbat as this gift. God gave us this gift of rest, and that is a nice framing. But if we think about the idea of Lecha Dodi, which is that it's not just a gift, but we're marrying Lecha Dodi, which means we are entering into this sacred partnership. When you marry somebody, there's an expectation that each partner is coming to that relationship with something to offer. There is a give and mutual give and take. And so Shabbat is just, it's not just a gift, something that happens to us that we're like, oh, this is great, I get these 25 hours of rest. But we also have to bring something to Shabbat. And we don't often talk about that or ask ourselves, what are we putting into it? And so as we are going to learn in just a moment a beautiful new melody for Lecha Dodi with Josh, I just offer the question for you to think about. When we celebrate Shabbat, how do we step into that dramatic role, the drama of Lecha Dodi, to really become, whether it's the bride, the groom, partner, whatever, however you want to imagine yourself and however you want to imagine Shabbat, how do you step into that role of being a partner with Shabbat? What are you bringing to that relationship? So Josh is going to teach us a melody by Josh Warshawsky. Josh, take it away.
Thanks, Rabbi. I love the way you teed it up with this sort of dramatic beginning of Shabbat and what we can do to make it a separation and a special moment in time. So I'm going to sing a new melody, and at the end, stay tuned. There's going to be a little teaser for something else that's not a part of this prayer. You'll recognize that those are words we don't normally sing in this, but it's an extra special way to welcome in Shabbat as we transition out of Kabbalat Shabbat at the end of this prayer. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nikabela Shamor v'zachor bedibor echad Hishmianu elam yuchad Adonai echad ushmo לשם ותפארת ולצילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת לקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת לקבלה Kiva orech kumi uri shida beri kavod Adonai alayech nigla lecha adodi likrat kala pene Shabbat likabela Shalom ateret be'ala Gam besimcha uvtzala Toch emunei am segula Boi kala Lecha Dodi likrat kala You've heard it now, try trying to sing along. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Shalom Malachi Hashalom Malachi Elyon Malachi Hashalom Hashalom Malachi
That's beautiful, Josh. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, what are you thinking in terms of this melody? What you did to prepare it? Anything you're thinking about today?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is I have never really thought about the lyrics or the text so much until I heard you speaking about it. And I think a lot of times we do a really upbeat Lecha Dodi. This is the moment, the final moment at the end of Kabbalat Shabbat. Let's get up and let's sing it and dance. And then sometimes I do, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah to this, which I think is really that melancholic and kind of somber, emotional. But what I never realized is that they're both in the text. You've got these, this beautiful love story. You're getting married. How ecstatic and happy can you be? And we're talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and they're both in there. And in some ways, I think this might be the best melody I've ever heard that encapsulates that, where it's like the verses really are, they switch to the minor. It's very, inducing that melancholy feeling and emotive. And yet the verse, the Lecha Dodi, I think is just such a pretty, beautiful tune that it's got the sweet and the sour in there that mix together so nicely. So I like this tune much better now after hearing you speak than I even did, and I already liked it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love exactly what you said. And I was thinking, I love what you said about mixing the sweet and the sour, because I was thinking as you were teaching it, I was thinking like, oh, it's such a beautiful melody. Like you could almost imagine a bride walking down the aisle to that music. It's so beautiful. But then you're right. It also does have the element of the minor key as well. So very cool.
Maybe it's just some of the most beautiful things. Like that's when I feel emotional. That's when I want to, like, if I'm going to shed a tear in a movie, it's at the moment where it's like the wedding, not the like, oh, the sad thing happened. That's just me maybe. But
yeah.
And then in terms of this, you probably noticed it was a little different than the ones I've done before, because I had a sort of a band here with me.
Yeah.
I joke that you can't see them because we're social distancing.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, I've got all this new equipment, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it feel like we're in the sanctuary. And the last experience I had in the sanctuary was, I forget what we were calling it, the Tefillah band, when Tracy was, her last time, and I was brand new, and we had all these musicians, and we were, we had a flute and a violin and an accordion. And so obviously it's not as good and it's not organic as real musicians vibing off of one another, but I do want to add a few more elements until we can get back. And what I'm telling you that I'm missing the most, even more than the musicians, which is impossible for me to recreate, is the harmonies. And I just can't wait to hear this melody because if you listen to Josh Warshawsky on YouTube, and don't be surprised, he's got different verses. The text is different in his version if you listen to it, because he's not doing the verses that we typically do at TBT. But listen for the harmonies. There's like 8 of the best singers in the Jewish world. He flew down to LA to record this live at the sanctuary where he works. And it's got so much potential, and I can hear our congregation in that beautiful room with so much reverb in our sanctuary. This is going to really come to life.
Awesome. Well, thank you for bringing this melody, and looking forward to singing it more with you and with everybody Join us on Friday at our Kabbalat Shabbat service virtually at 7 o'clock. And like always, we look forward to when we can also sing this together in person. So thanks very much. See you later.